This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. All right, it's time for me to react to your guys' hot takes. Always fun when I get to do this. These takes come from the Diamonds in the Rough video. The first hot take belongs to Mr. Rollup 10. They better come out of this draft with a franchise quarterback no matter what round they get him in. Barry and Stefanski need a turnaround similar to what Nix and Daniels brought to Washington and Denver, or everybody is getting fired. All right, so yeah, the Browns need to be better than they were last year. Nobody's in agreement about that, but like it doesn't have to happen one way or somebody's fired, right? If the Browns are able to pull a good season out with Kirk Cousins or whatever free agent they bring in here, that will be fine. Then nobody's going to get fired. So this idea that you need to get a Bo Nix or Jayden Daniels in here to fix the situation, I just don't think is there. And also, I would say this. There's no Jayden Daniels in this draft. So, like, you can tell me you need to find Jayden Daniels in this draft. There's no Jayden Daniels in this draft. And if there's no Jayden Daniels in this draft, there's no franchise quarterback in this draft. It just is what it is. What the Browns need to do is play their cards as well as they can this offseason to put out the best result possible. That's it. If that includes drafting a quarterback, that includes it. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I'm not going to be super specific about how they get there because I've watched the NFL long enough to know that you can have success a multitude of different ways, especially if we're talking about having a decent, like you're talking about Bo Nix, like they went to the playoffs and lost in the first round. You can do that with a lot of different builds of teams. You don't have to have a franchise quarterback. Hell, the Steelers did that with Russ last year. Ranking the Browns free agent and trade options. Big Red said, my theory on Kirk Cousins in 2024 is that he ran out of gas mid-season. He was fairly effective until then. He tore his Achilles in the middle of 2023, which had to affect his conditioning. Every player who has done an Achilles, and I speak from personal experience, does better the second year back. Grant Delpit is an example. I would sign him and I wouldn't look back, draft a couple of quarterback prospects in the second and sixth, and go into the season in better shape than 2024. Yeah, that's where I'm at with Kirk. With Kirk Cousins, he's a player that tends to get two phenomenons thrown at him at the same time. There are people who can't wait to tell you that Kirk Cousins is better than what Kirk Cousins is. The second Kirk Cousins does anything good. Like Kirk Cousins had that nice little run at the beginning of the season, and people were like, could he win MVP? And that was ridiculous. And now Kirk Cousins ends the season with a bad run, and people talk about Kirk Cousins like he got nothing to offer. Kirk Cousins is never as good as you think Kirk Cousins is. He's never as bad as you think Kirk Cousins is. Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins, which is everything that you have heard people praise and complain about. Is he going to be able to run an offense efficiently? Yes. Is he going to be able to be on time? Yes. Is he going to be somebody who runs a system pretty well? Yes. Is he going to throw too many checkdowns? Yes. Is he not going to be the most mobile guy in the world? Yes. So, yeah, I get it. The Achilles might accelerate this for other people, but people beat up on Kirk and pile up anytime he has a bad season. He's never as bad as people say he is. He's never as good as people say he is. He's just Kirk Cousins. So, yeah, I would be fine with Kirk. I'm not doing backflips. I'm not going to come in here thinking Kirk Cousins is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL next year or anything like that. I think Kirk Cousins is going to be very mid next year, right? But I'll take mid because I just had a horrible quarterback experience in 2024. So, yeah, I think people are a little bit lower on Kirk Cousins than what is now. I mean, we saw a 38-year-old Joe Flacco run this offense a couple of years ago to a good enough point to where the Browns can make the playoffs. Acting as if Kirk Cousins is impossible of replicating that, I think is a bit silly. Like, I get it. I've never been the big Kirk Cousins fan ever. But, yeah, man, you think Joe Flacco could do it. Kirk Cousins is the new version of Joe Flacco. Just like they're the same. We're in the same tier of quarterback, having people having the same conversations about them all the time. Kirk Cousins is most certainly capable of doing like something that old Joe Flacco was able to do. Like, yeah, Joe Flacco ain't tear his Achilles, but he was coming off the couch at 38. So, I mean, there's that. All right, next video that we're going to look at comments from. Browns hired a new offensive coordinator, Bubba Ventrone. This one, Jay Chunk says, love that you touched on the Browns trying to modernize their offense to what Green Bay, Los Angeles, and Minnesota does. One thing that stood out in the Houston playoffs was D'Amico Ryans predicted that a play led to a pick six because he saw the exact same concept when he was playing for the Texans in 2012. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? But D'Amico Ryans was like perfectly suited to make that kind of a call because not only did he play against Joe Flacco in 2012, but he played under Gary Kubiak when he was the head coach. Like that was the time in which Gary Kubiak was the head coach with the Texans. So he really understood that exact flavor of the offense. And yeah, I do think that we're kind of forgetting because of the failure of 2024 that even the success of 2023 had its issues on offense. And one of those issues was it felt like it was time that the Browns need to modernize his offense a little bit. It starts to feel like a bit of a throwback that the Browns are running. I think the Browns understand that, right? Ken Dorsey was brought in to help Deshaun Watson, but I also think they thought he could add some things to this offense. Maybe he did some things while he was here to help that, but you know, the having to force the Deshaun Watson stuff on, it just didn't do him any favors. And then yeah, I think that's what they're bringing in. You know, Tommy Rees here, and why they have all these college coaches here is because they're trying to pull in new stuff from younger sources to be able to update this offense a little bit. So yeah, I agree with you on that. I did a whole video about that when Alex Van Pelt got fired. Appreciate that. Raymond says, hey Q, I've seen some vids that said Tommy Rees actually wasn't much of a fan of Jaylen Milroe. Admittedly, I haven't done too much research on it though. Look, I'm just going to, as a general rule, don't believe anything you hear that's telling you they got the scoop on a personal relationship between a coach and a player on social media. It's usually nonsense. Now, if somebody comes out with like a detailed report, like if a accredited writer is willing to put their reputation on the line and report something, okay, cool. But if it's like a random aggregate account or some random person on shorts that say, oh, this player didn't like that player or something like that, you just got to ignore all of that. It's just noise. Because it's not really real. I don't know how Tommy Rees felt about Jaylen Milroe. He could have loved Jaylen Milroe. He could have been infatuated with him. He could hate Jaylen Milroe, for all I know. There's really no real truth to that. The only thing that I could say that might have got in there is Jaylen Milroe and Bill O'Brien didn't get along. So maybe that could be what you heard, and then maybe you thought it was Tommy Rees because they just said offensive coordinator, or maybe that information got confused. But I do know that like Milroe himself has talked about the fact that Bill O'Brien did not believe in him when he first got to Alabama. He said something about that at a press conference. But Tommy Rees and Jaylen Milroe, there's nothing to indicate that relationship isn't good. You know, I don't know what it is behind closed doors, but nobody does. And anybody telling you they know that information without like putting an actual career reputation on the line for it, probably just like telling you stuff. All right, let's talk about Travis Hunter. This is the video I dropped earlier this week about my complex feelings about Travis Hunter as a amazingly talented prospect that I'm not sure if I want the Browns to draft there too. Matt says, with the physicality of the NFL, there's no way Hunter could hold up to playing both ways. Look at how often Denzel Ward gets injured. Now imagine if he played both sides of the field, he'd be lucky to dress for 5 games a season. See, that's the weird thing about how often people get injured, because there are players with similar builds to Denzel that just don't get injured, right? Like they just don't miss that many games. And there are some players with Denzel's build that get injured a ton. There are players with a way bigger build than Denzel Ward that get injured all the time. It's kind of random. Some guys just get injured a lot, like Mo Hurst. He's a big dude. He's way bigger than Denzel Ward. He always gets hurt. The other thing I think to factor in here when it comes to Travis Hunter is he plays corner and wide receiver. Those are two positions that don't do a lot of tackling and don't do a lot of getting tackled. So let's say if he's a good enough corner to play on the outside, it might not be a matter of physicality. And he is most certainly a good enough corner to play on the outside, by the way. But it might not be a question of physicality because he's not going to be tackling too often. And then on the other side of the ball, if he's a boundary wide receiver, not like a slot guy who's going to get hit, which I think he is a boundary wide receiver, and he's able to win consistently on the outside, then he's going to be near the sideline. He's not going to take a ton of hits. So it's more of a question of conditioning than it is about physicality. It'll come down to how good is Hunter at avoiding taking damage when he gets hit or hits somebody. There are some players who are very good at that. Denzel Ward, famously, not very good at avoiding damaging himself when he's tackling somebody. And that's why Denzel gets a lot of injuries. But maybe Travis is much better at that, right? Maybe he's better at avoiding damage. Lamar Jackson's like super skinny, but he's really good at avoiding taking damage, so it doesn't really matter. Jayden Daniels is terrible at taking of avoiding damage, but he's just so young and flexible that it doesn't matter how hard he gets hit. So there's a lot of ways you can avoid injury. I think the concern more has to do with practice time in the NFL. How much time are you going to get to dedicate to playing these positions both at an NFL level, and cardio. Cardio is going to be a big one for him. Because it's one thing to be conditioned well enough to play corner, but playing both in the NFL is kind of crazy. Especially because I get the argument that Pat Shermer put out there that he's not going to have to play as many plays, but the speed in which he's going to have to run when he's covering guys, like we'll find out early on, because the speed you have to run to cover somebody like a Jerry Jeudy, very different. And then the speed that you would have to run to shake somebody like a Denzel Ward, very different. Like you're exerting yourself at a higher level at the NFL despite playing less plays. So I think that's ultimately what's going to stop him from playing both sides of the ball, especially like later in his career. But I do think you gotta do something to try to get more out of him offensively or defensively, depending on where you primarily put him. Joseph says the reality is that there's less of a chance of Abdul Carter or Hunter being bust than the two top quarterbacks in this draft. The Browns must not whiff on their first pick, ergo swap picks with the Giants, get extra draft capital, and pick up Carter or Hunter. Yeah, I just don't think the Giants are going to be thirsty to trade up, to be honest with you. Like, yeah, if the Giants want to give you a bunch of picks to move up, but I don't think that's the case. I think the Giants are fine with whoever falls to them at 3. But yeah, I would just pick Abdul Carter because I want to pick the player that I think has the best chance of being the best player possible. And that to me is Abdul Carter. And for a team that hasn't had first round picks in 3 years, you should want to add a premium talent to your team regardless of position. That's where I stand, because you just need more guys like that, right? You don't want to run out and not have any impact players, or all your impact players are super old. Like for the Browns, all of their best impact players were drafted in like 2017-18. They need to refresh that deck, to get some help for those older guys. All right, that's it for Hot Takes. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.